Hey everybody, this is David Bush, and alongside of me today is a new friend, Dan LaRock. Dan's a entrepreneur, husband, father, just a great dude. And I've had a chance to be following him on the internet, and I've been attracted to this new book that he wrote. And just the way that Dan carries himself is just an attraction to a guy that just lives an extraordinary life. And I think that if you know anything about me, you're very aware that I'm always a fan of people that are living their dreams and changing their world. And Dan's obviously doing that. He's got lots of different things that he's got his hand into, and I'll provide a little bit more of his bio in the description of this video. But I just wanted to get a chance to introduce Dan to all of you and have him share a little bit about who he is and why he wrote this new book, and have him share a little bit more about it. So Dan, welcome. I'm excited to get a chance to talk to you.
Mr. Bush, that is one of the most warm and friendly introductions I've ever had. And on this eve of Valentine's Day, I'm going to remind my wife just how awesome that introduction was.
Yes, I'm going to have this published as soon as possible so people can share it as a gift for Valentine's Day with their spouse, and we're going to get a lot of gift giving out of this beautiful interview we're going to do today. But hey, talk to us a little bit more about your background and kind of what led you up to this point of writing this book and taking your grandfather's wisdom and sharing it with the world.
Sure, sure. I'm a Minnesota boy, so I was born in the Twin Cities region, graduating from a suburban high school there, and then I went to college in northern Minnesota. That is where I met my eventual spouse almost 30 years ago to this month, actually. And we've been married for 28 years. It'll be 29 in August. And so I was able to get a degree out of that university experience, and from there began working both in higher ed settings, and then also eventually in philanthropic and fundraising settings, and then eventually to the practice that I'm a partner in now called Hub International, which is a large insurance consulting practice and retirement consulting practice firm. So Minnesota to kind of North Dakota, down near Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we live now. And so from that background, I've been involved in both higher ed, philanthropy, and larger business for the bulk of my career. We My grandfather was someone that I knew pretty well growing up, but I wouldn't say we had as tight of a relationship as some young men are fortunate to have with their grandfathers. My grandfather was a Methodist minister, and when I was 15 years old or 16 years old, he did come to live with our family for about a couple of months, as he was about 82, 3 years old at this point. And he had come from California. So usually I was able to spend time with my grandfather in the summers every third or fourth year, but it wasn't like we were fishing together. He certainly wasn't making our athletic games or anything like that, because he was ministering in Northern California. So what I would say is, in that time, though, I always had a pretty genuine curiosity, and my grandfather had collected a series of his messages that he was working on and reading over the Bay Area radio waves in the mid 1960s. And when I was 15, 16 years old, and that book or that collection of messages in a book form came to our family, sermons were for Sundays, David. These aren't things I'm going to be thinking about in my 16-year-old brain, right? I was chasing other other sorts of things at that time, and so I didn't really get the book read or his messages really digested until I was a little bit older, probably really after the first few years of marriage, and as we started to really settle into the things we thought would be important in the world. I wanted to understand where my grandfather was coming from a little bit more, so that's where I rediscovered, wow, Grandpa had quite a few things to say about the conditions of the world he was living in, certainly with a lens from a Methodist minister, but there are all kinds of messages that he wrote that would be perfect for any background, from the morality and the human rights conversations all the way into the childhood Bill of Rights. And so there's a number of things in there that, as I got a little older and a little more serious in my faith walk, Grandpa was able to I was able to rediscover Grandpa's messages, let them kind of pour into me, and as I realized these might be good for people who are searching and people who are yearning for what else is out there, I thought maybe we shouldn't keep these under a I shouldn't hide it under a bushel, so to speak. So
That's great.
we reintroduce it, yeah, in a form called Grandpa's Gift.
That's so good. And I've heard somebody say recently that, it's not so much that we need to be sharing new information with the same old people, but it's that we need to be sharing some of the old information with new people, and bringing in that hope, that inspiration, the guidance, the mentoring, and having some age-old wisdom from somebody that's in your genealogy tree. I'm sure that was meaningful to you. Now that you've had a chance to complete the project, what does it mean to you to be able to have encapsulated this wisdom to be able to deliver that to the world? I mean, it's got to have some significance to you.
Yeah, I feel in some ways completely like not adequate for this task. In a lot of ways, I'm like, I'm not sure that I'm the best vehicle through which this could come. And each time I go through that, as I visit with more and more people about the book, they're like, well, Dan, I think in a lot of ways you are the best person to share these as a grandson, but more importantly, you're just a guy. You're just every man. And that is exactly who my grandfather was talking to. It's every person who may or may not have a degree of intentionality in their respective faith walk. And it could be a number. We were as a Methodist, grandpa was a Christian, but at the end of the day, the nuggets in here are pretty universal. And so I was feeling like there's, especially as we came out of COVID and through that COVID-19, and we had racial reconciliation issues that came to light, and we had youth in a manner of acting with the world that was dramatically shifting from one decade to the next with the invent of so much online deliverable. We had underwhelming governmental structures, in some people's minds unable and unprepared to help, and all of these themes it reminded me of a passage from Ecclesiastes, which simply says, there's nothing new under the sun. And as we were experiencing some of these things in that 2020, 2021 time period, all of a sudden that rush of messaging that I had read 10, 15 years before was coming back in such fire, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go back and look at this. So as I did, I realized the messages that were 60 years old were dealing with the same things. And really interestingly, David, to me, mental health was a massive component of what my grandpa was talking about to the people of California and the West Coast those years. And it's becoming such a more transparency related conversation today. I think people today are far more comfortable talking about some of that mental need for all of us in any given situation. And my grandfather was hitting on it 60 years ago at a time when I'm sure it was like, what is this dude talking about? We don't talk about things like that. And so long story short, some of these ecclesiastical, themes kind of kept coming through me. And so in that way, I realized maybe I am an adequate person to be able to deliver this. I mean, I'm a grandson. I do have a number of folks that I work with, in and around the region. I'm frequently in different places. And again, I'm just a guy. I'm every man. But at the end of the day, it's been an honor to be able to bring some of that wisdom to, first of all, to my family, my broader family, and their extended relatives, and then on to a much broader group as we've had some success with it so far.
That's great. Talk a little bit more about, what does it mean to be able to complete a book? Is this your first book, Dan?
Yeah, for sure.
First of many, I'm sure.
Well,
So,
we'll see. Yeah.
because there's a lot of people out there that have a desire to write a book, and you took something that was meaningful to you, and you worked with a team of people. Talk a little bit about that process, and maybe your gift, besides this amazing book that you've written, is your gift of just bringing other people the motivation and inspiration to take something that's meaningful to them and actually applying it into their life, and maybe even taking that step and completing a book. Talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so that's a great question, David. We had a talk, my wife and I, about maybe just taking some of the messages of my grandfather and just polishing them a little bit, like getting them digitized, and then maybe just reproducing them for our literal immediate family, maybe like 100 people in the LaRock and Brown clans, right? And I shared that as a couple thoughts over coffee, a couple mornings with some friends of mine who are in various walks of life in South Dakota. And I said, and one of them is a pastor of a pretty large church in Sioux Falls, and his name is Adam Weber. And Adam looked at me and said, I'm gonna I'm going to challenge you to think that maybe you should speak into these a little bit. Maybe you need to bring a little bit of a modern approach, or maybe your walk through these messages to folks. I said, well, I don't know. There's not much I could say. He goes, but maybe you should. And so that made me stop and think, could it be helpful? Would it be easier to harvest what my grandfather's thoughts are if there's a little bit of perspective with them? Could that be helpful? Well, as soon as I made that kind of thought enter in my mind, I was able to somehow stumble across, literally online, the Throne Publishing Group, which is a publishing group in Sioux Falls, led by a gentleman named Jeremy Brown. And it was complete accident that I met Jeremy. There was I didn't know Jeremy before 2020. I had no idea who he was. I know a few people that knew him, but when I stumbled across this whole publishing company, it was literally like a scroll, on my phone that night. I'm like, no way. So then I noticed that had some sort of event, like an hour-long event or something. Have you ever thought about writing a book or something? Come join us. So I clicked on that. The next morning, I happened to have a couple free hours, so I was able to jump in and engage. And the rest is kind of from history from there. I was hooked. I thought, this is something that doesn't appear to be too terribly time consuming, but I don't know for sure what I don't know. And ultimately, Jeremy was able to connect me with editors and story creator type folks who helped me with the cover and all sorts of different paths. Now, I will say my initial, oh, this is going to be easy, is probably tempered a little bit because there's a lot that goes into finding the right time, the right motivational setting, being able to draw inspiration when it comes versus trying to just turn it on when I have time for it. I think there were a number of times that the process lagged for me. But when I was able to, connect with the coaches and the folks that I'd met through Throne, we were able to really pull it together. There was one point, I'll share this. There was one point where they were going to talk about, Dan, if you just want to speak, we'll write. If you just speak, we'll take the notes and create. And I'm like, I get that, but I think my grandpa would be disappointed in me if I did that. I thought, I've got some of my original thoughts. I'm able to put them down. We've got a good editor working on this. I just have to make sure I can complete my side. And I tell you what, David, I'm so glad I did, because I feel with the comments I've got in the book combined with my grandfather's, that they really are, my thoughts, my walk alongside of him. And I'm happy that I was able to get it done myself. It took more time than I thought. So
Yeah,
probably 18 months start to finish. But
that's great.
at the end of the day, I'm glad I did it. And I'm glad I had the coaching I did. Otherwise, it would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, journey worth taking. That's great. So let's talk a little bit more about the vision for the book. I mean, 5 years from now, you and I are having this conversation. We're checking in with each other. What do you want to see happen with this book 5 years from now? Where do you want to see it impacting lives? Do you have a vision, or is it just more you're just taking it day by day?
Well, I think I'd feel really good 5 years from now if I was able to help. I'll give you an example. This weekend, I'm going to be doing a presentation to a couple hundred people in Southwest Minnesota, where the book is part of the topic. And actually, tomorrow for Valentine's Day, I'm going to be having several conversations of the book as a central part of it as well. And so I feel really good that the first couple of months has yielded a lot of interest in it, and we've been fortunate to have a few copies get into a number of people's hands. What I tell you 5 years from now is this: if the messages and the thought process behind my grandfather's messages that have done so much to help motivate my walk, if those messages and those thoughts can be even more widely shared, if I'm still having conversations with people that are maybe where life's okay, life's pretty good. I feel like I've got, I'm talking for someone else here. If I've got a great relationship with my wife, if my kids are in good shape and I like my job, but somehow there's something still missing. There's some kind of a churn happening that I can't quite put my finger on. I would argue that's going to be a higher power push. And that's what it was for me. And these messages help me uncover that, and has created a different level of intentionality, a different level of boldness, a different level of honestly loving my neighbor in a way that I don't know that I was as good at 10 years ago. And so if those conversations are still happening with new people who may be experiencing the same thing, or maybe it's that next generation of people who are 30 years old right now and becoming 40, I'll be 50, becoming 60, in that time. I think that would be awesome. And honestly, if some of the things that Grandpa was talking about with respect to children, right now my heart is really beating for children, children who are in maybe in situations that are challenged. Maybe it's a lack of a father in a relationship. My heart has just really been on fire for mentorship in our regions, and I think that's the next great calling for us. And I think there are plenty of messages in this book that speak to the need to help raise, help guide, help be there for kids when maybe there is not a parental structure or even a nuclear family that can do that, or maybe they need your help to do that. So if those kind of conversations are caused, if this book is helping more people lean into those types of decisions for others, well, I'll be really happy. I mean, I'll just be literally, over the moon, because I think my grandfather could look at something like that and think that's exactly what I intended, son. That's exactly what I wanted. A little more intentional about the things that drive us.
Very good. Well, I'm sure you've already made him proud just getting it done. Now it's a matter of just execution and implementation and just seeing what God does with the book. But talk to us a little bit about where can they find out more information about Grandpa's Gift and about you, Dan, and what's the best place to reach out to you?
You bet. So we designed a website for the book, and that website is just www.grandpasgiftbook.com. And you can find out more information about my grandpa Max in that website. There's some history along with some of the places he lived and worked. It's kind of a neat map that we've included there. A little bit more about me as well. You're going to find some references in that place about some of the other work I'm involved in, both with Hub International and also with Rock Ranch. And you'll see a number of different ways to get a hold of the book that way. In addition, I am a pretty active person on LinkedIn and Facebook. If folks would want to reach out to me and connect with for any reason at all, I'm usually pretty good about that. So LinkedIn's a great place to find just Daniel LaRock on LinkedIn. I look like this on there, so you can my pictures right there. And then on Facebook, similarly, there's a shot of my wife and I on Facebook. Be happy to connect with folks that way.
Wonderful. Well, hey, thanks for taking some time to share a little bit about your passion, your mission with Grandpa's Gift, and all the good works that you're doing out there to lead others to live an extraordinary life. So look forward to seeing you at the top of the mountain with your arms raised high, knowing that you fulfilled Grandpa's legacy, man.
Oh, it would be awesome. Thanks so much for your interest, David. I appreciate it very much.
You bet.